New York didn't just elect a mayor, New York elected a model, a fully assembled, institutionally produced activist to government pipeline product packaged as youthful authenticity and sold as moral urgency.
So Ben Shapiro just delivered a devastating expose on how the radical left systematically captured New York City through institutional pipelines. This isn't just about one mayor. It's about a 30-year strategy to transform America's financial capital into a socialist testing ground. Let's break this down.
So, who is Zoran Mamdani? To understand Mamdani, you don't start with New York in 2026. You start about 30 years ago in a house in Kampala, Uganda. Now, he may have been born in Uganda in 1991, but Mamdani didn't grow up in the developing world. He grew up in a posh, sprawling apartment on Riverside Drive in Manhattan. His mother, Mira Nair, is an Oscar-nominated, Harvard-educated filmmaker.
This methodical approach matters because family ideology is the strongest predictor of political worldview. When both parents are elite anti-Western academics, you're not getting a moderate politician. You're getting the weaponized product of decades of theoretical radicalism made practical.
And almost every single one of her acclaimed films asks the same underlying question. What did the West take from the rest of the world? In 2013, she boycotted the Haifa International Film Festival in Israel, posting publicly, "I will go to Israel when the walls come down. I will go when the occupation is gone. I stand with Palestine." Mamdani's father, Mahmoud Mamdani, is an elite Columbia professor and one of the most cited post-colonial academics on planet Earth.
Notice how both parents built careers attacking Western institutions while simultaneously benefiting from them. This creates the classic revolutionary mindset, using the system's success to fund its own destruction. Mamdani inherited this exact psychological framework.
He wrote the books on how Africa was colonized and how America, not Europe, not Asia, not the Middle East, America is the genesis of all colonialism. His core thesis is simple. The very foundations of the West and our most precious institutions don't liberate, they control. So, when people sell Mamdani as a working-class hero, understand what that actually means. He is the polished political expression of the worldview that lives in elite lecture halls and film festivals. He is a communist Nepo baby.
This exposes the fundamental lie of progressive politics. Elite children of privilege cosplaying as working-class revolutionaries. Mamdani's authenticity is completely manufactured by the same academic media complex that now presents him as a grassroots hero. Pure theater.
When you're raised in that, when your family dinner table is a literal Marxist seminar, politics becomes your new source of actual meaning in life. Competence, performance, virtue are supplanted by insufferable activist credentials. You'd think Mamdani might be grateful to the West. After all, Western institutions granted him and his family great success. But, of course, he can't imagine showing an ounce of gratitude. Instead, he labels the West the villain, excoriates capitalism as the culprit, and calls all inequality the result of oppression.
This psychological contradiction is everywhere on the radical left, condemning the very system that elevated them while refusing any gratitude or acknowledgement. It's not about fixing inequality, it's about maintaining perpetual victimhood as a source of moral authority and political power.
This period as the bridge from his elite upbringing to his radical political persona. The most notable of these failed attempts was one at a rap career under the painfully cringe name Young Cardamom. Young Cardamom. He appeared on the soundtrack to his mother's Disney film, released tracks about Kampala nightlife and South Asian diaspora identity, and described his brand as being built around, and I am quoting here, authenticity, movement, culture, the streets, and the youth. The streets? Dude grew up on Riverside Drive. Unlike yours truly, his rap career did not exactly set the world on fire, but it did leave one interesting artifact.
Young Cardamom perfectly captures how today's radical politicians manufacture street credibility. Growing up on Riverside Drive, then rapping about the streets, is identical to how he now poses as a working-class champion while pushing elite academic theories.
A 2017 track surfaced during his campaign, in which Mamdani raps approvingly about the Holy Land Five. These were the leaders of an organization convicted of funneling money to Hamas. So, not exactly Hamilton. But here's what the rap career actually taught him, and this is what matters. Packaging. Branding. how to present radical ideas wrapped in the language of authenticity and youth, and movement, and the streets. He wasn't very good at it as a rapper, but he got considerably better at it as a politician. After his inability to deliver in the private sector, Mamdani fell back on what he knew best: activism, advocacy, and politics.
The Hamas connection reveals the true agenda, supporting designated terrorist organizations while packaging it as artistic expression. This is exactly how radical ideas get normalized. Wrap extremism in youth culture, then claim anyone opposing it is attacking creativity or authenticity.
This has as much to do with the man and the system he was brought up in as it does the context and climate of New York City itself. The current problems of New York City only got this bad under decades of poor democratic governance. So how did it go from this to this? The city doesn't need to look at Venezuela or China or Cuba to understand where socialism leads. They need only look back into their past. From Mayor Robert Wagner Jr. in the 50s and 60s, responsible for unionizing the public sector, to John Lindsay, who despite his conservative ties governed like a liberal, expanding welfare rules, pouring borrowed money into housing. Then came Ed Koch and David Dinkins, who, while balancing the budget, refused to touch rent control.
With Trump back in office, this historical pattern becomes crucial. While conservatives focus on federal politics, progressives captured city after city through local elections. Under Biden, this accelerated, but Trump's return gives us a 4-year window to reverse decades of municipal socialism.
Finally, in 1994, a desperate New York City elected Rudy Giuliani. He implemented broken windows policing, empowered the NYPD, cleared out the drug markets, and built up Times Square. Murder fell by nearly 70%. Welfare was slashed with work requirements, ushering in an era of growth and prosperity. He led the city with heroism before making way for Mike Bloomberg, who ran the city like a pragmatist, keeping crime low. But progressives cannot stand prosperity.
This insight is brilliant. Progressives need dysfunction to maintain power. Prosperity under Giuliani and Bloomberg proved capitalism works, so they had to deliberately recreate crisis. Disorder isn't policy failure for them, it's the prerequisite for revolutionary change.
Homelessness in New York City is at a Great Depression level high, with over 100,000 people sleeping in shelters nightly, up 175% since the year 2000. Less than 34% of New Yorkers rate their quality of life as excellent or good, down from 51% in 2017. The city faces a projected budget gap of $10 billion. The median one-bed Manhattan rent is over $4,000 a month, with an affordable apartment vacancy rate of under 1%. And when people feel like the system is failing, somebody fills the vacuum. That's the setup for Mamdani.
These aren't abstract statistics. They're the concrete human cost of progressive governance. Over 100,000 homeless, $4,000 rent, billion-dollar deficits. This manufactured crisis created the desperation that made voters willing to try literal socialism. Mission accomplished.
He advocates for defunding the police, abolishing cash bail and pretrial detention, universal rent control, public housing expansions funded by massive wealth taxes, sanctuary city maximalism, extended voting rights to undocumented immigrants, decriminalizing all drugs, sex work, and petty crimes, and implementing literal city-run utilities and government-run grocery stores. He advocates for bottomless welfare, fiscal irresponsibility, and hostility to the police. In June 2025, he flat-out stated, "I don't think we should have billionaires." He supports the anti-Semitic BDS movement against Israel. He falsely called the war in Gaza a genocide and publicly stated he would arrest Benjamin Netanyahu if he set foot in New York City.
This agenda isn't social democracy. It's textbook Marxist-Leninism adapted for American cities. Government-run grocery stores, wealth confiscation, drug decriminalization, police abolition. Under Trump's federal pushback, these local experiments become even more important to the radical project.
Although unlikely, under the city's charter, Mamdani could accumulate up to 16 years of executive control over the financial capital of the West. In other words, Zohran Mamdani could theoretically serve until 2034. He could sit out a term and then return in 2038, potentially governing New York City until 2046. By the time he leaves office, he'd be 54 years old, wielding 16 years of high-profile executive control over the financial capital of the West. People will tell you not to worry. They'll point out that historically, the New York City mayoralty is a political dead end. They'll remind you that Mamdani is constitutionally barred from ever becoming president. But if you think this movement is contained, you're fundamentally misunderstanding the radical left's strategy. They don't need Zohran Mamdani in the Oval Office. They need him exactly where he is, commanding a $100 billion budget, turning the crown jewel of American capitalism into a socialist beta test.
This strategic thinking is why the left keeps winning despite being a minority. They don't need the presidency when they control the economic engines. 16 years of socialist experimentation in America's financial capital could permanently reshape the entire country's economic future.
They aren't relying on the old political pipelines because New York City isn't just a stepping stone, it's a broadcast tower. Mamdani's ideas will not stay in City Hall. The ideological loyalists Mamdani appoints today will take their New York resumes and infiltrate school boards, police commissions, curriculum committees, and zoning boards across the country. He's already hard at work rewarding the activists who paved his way. Mamdani recently established a standalone office of LGBTQIA plus affairs, handpicking Taylor Brown, a career activist attorney from the ACLU, and a man acting as a woman as its first director. On paper, it's about representation, but in reality, it's the institutionalization of the pipeline. Mamdani is creating a permanent command center inside the New York City government.
This is the real long-term threat. New York becomes the radical left's West Point, training ideological commissars who then spread nationwide. Every activist Mamdani promotes today becomes tomorrow's school superintendent, police chief, or city councilman across America.
The left didn't put a Democratic socialist into the New York City mayor's office by accident. They spent 30 years building a farm system. We, of course, need to fund, train, and elect hyper-competent conservatives at the most granular level of local government. You stop a radical mayor by stacking the city council with pragmatists who gridlock his agenda. We need to attack the nonprofit industrial complex. The radical left is largely subsidized by the same system they claim to hate: the American taxpayer, the community organizations, the harm reduction centers, the housing advocacy groups. These are, in most cases, just left-wing PACs masquerading as charities, kept alive by municipal, state, and federal grants. We must aggressively defund this apparatus. If they want to dismantle the free market, make them do it on their own dime.
These solutions become even more urgent under Trump's second term. While federal policy shifts right, the real battle is in city halls and school boards. We have 4 years to build the local infrastructure that can actually implement conservative governance where people live.
Conservatives cannot just be the party of socialism is bad. We have to be the party of here is how you afford a house. This means going to war with the regulatory state. We need to aggressively champion deregulation, destroy red tape, destroy zoning laws that prevent developers from building homes, smash the public sector unions bankrupting city budgets, and offer aggressive tax incentives to bring business back. We have to prove that free markets and law and order actually delivers the prosperity socialism only pretends to offer. Because, of course, that's what capitalism does. Socialism isn't compassion, it's elite vanity disguised as empathy, and it destroys the very people it claims to protect. Zohran Mamdani and his allies are betting that conservatives will eventually just give up and move away. They're betting the right is too fractured, too tired, too focused on national drama to fight a grinding block-by-block war for the future of our cities. It's time to prove them wrong.
This is exactly right. Conservatives can't just be the opposition party anymore. With Trump's federal backing, we now have the window to prove free markets actually deliver prosperity. But that requires winning local elections and dismantling the regulatory state city by city.
The left spent 30 years building the machine that took over New York. We have to start building the machine that takes it back today.
With Trump back in the White House, we have unprecedented opportunity to coordinate federal pressure with local conservative movements. The left's 30-year project can be reversed, but only if we match their long-term thinking with sustained local political warfare.